this will be a real test of whether Trump can change gear, get his head down and stick with something. So far, the real lesson of his presidency has been that it's been a sort of ADHD presidency. He just can't stick to solving a problem. He moves on.
737 days and a few hours since Hamas launched its attack on Israel in October the 7th. 7 hostages have been returned this morning already. The next 13 look like they're on the way as well. Palestinian prisoners are now set to be released in return. It's the first step of a plan that offers the hope of peace and prosperity for Israel, Gaza and the whole region. But can we really dream of that after more than 2 years of war where tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed? Mark Malloch Brown is the former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Joins us now. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning, Stig.
We've seen, we're keeping an eye on Hostages Square. There's moments of great joy. But how optimistic should we be beyond that joy?
Well, I think the caution you expressed earlier is right on. I think people perhaps haven't quite taken on board that for Hamas, the Israeli hostages, which had been a source of great leverage over the last couple of years, had ultimately become a liability, an excuse for Netanyahu to continue the conflict. And yet for Netanyahu getting those hostages home and for President Trump getting those hostages home had become an overriding need. So there's an obvious moment of agreement on this first ceasefire step of this exchange of Palestinians and Israelis. And for all the families involved, will be a moment of great celebration. And for both communities and for all of us around the world, a great moment of celebration. But the hard part starts after that. There really isn't yet any fundamental deep agreement around the nature of governance of Gaza after this, the role or not of the PLO, Palestinian Authority, the whole security arrangement. We've seen Hamas fighters reappearing in the last day or so. And, that is evidence that even after the extraordinary 100% assault of Israel forces, the IDF, the absolute elimination of Gaza City, Hamas fighters survived. And so the idea that an international security force is going to be able to dig them out in a way that Israel couldn't is quite an expectation. So around security, around governance, above all around allowing the Palestinians a voice in their own government going forward. These are unresolved issues and the two sides are way apart on them.
Donald Trump landed maybe 20 minutes ago, and when he took off, he said, "I'm good at solving wars, I'm good at making peace." And there's two ways of thinking about this, Mark, I suppose. One, that sort of bull-headed, self-congratulatory, complete confident approach has probably taken us to this point. He's willing to cut through a lot of the obfuscation and just demand something and get it, if that thing is a relatively straightforward notion. Does that approach work for the next 2 years, 3 years to get us somewhere else?
Well, look, he's proved an expert in what you might call one-day stand diplomacy. And so I'm sure at the end of today, there will be, bravura announcements of progress. And, absolutely right, he does deserve, real sort of praise for having got the two sides here. They nearly got here under Biden, but Biden was no showman. He didn't know how to exert this kind of force, this public diplomacy, and he fell short. And Trump's got us there. But he's shown absolutely no staying power. All the wars he claims to have solved in the last 6 months actually are continuing. There were bold announcements out of Washington, and then it was back to business as normal for the combatants. So, I think, this will be a real test of whether Trump can change gear, get his head down and stick with something. So far, the real lesson of his presidency has been that it's been a sort of ADHD presidency. He just can't stick to solving a problem. He moves on.
The problem is maybe that the problem is insoluble, though. For all the positive talk and the hostages coming back, the Palestinian prisoners will be released. And then the thing you said at the beginning, Mark, all of the issues still remain. Israel will not want a state close to them which has the capacity to harm it again. The Palestinians will want autonomy. No one seems to be talking about a two-state solution by Europeans who have very little say in the matter whatsoever. The notion of getting from the triumph of the moment to something sustainable, I'm not even sure what the process that follows now.
Well, it's very, very difficult. But remember, going way back to Oslo, there have been processes, but, ultimately they have to allow a space for a Palestinian self-governed state and Oslo got shot down because there were enough in Israel who just did not want that solution. And there is no doubt that the feelings between the two sides have deeply worsened over the last few years. Both sides are consumed by a sense of the other's violence and betrayal to them. And so, while international diplomacy has reverted to a two-state solution, and you've seen this rush of European and states to recognize the right of a Palestinian state, nevertheless, on the ground, the direction has been the complete reverse. Yeah. Further polarization. So this is going to be a long, patient task for negotiators.
Does Britain have any role in this at all? I mean, the UK government said it's played a role in bringing about peace. The US ambassador to Israel called that delusional, but Steve Witkoff has given softer words about the British role. Do we really have anything role to play in this, or actually are we just observers here?
Well, look, I mean, historically, this all started with, a series of declarations and agreements out of the British government more than 100 years ago. And that has left Britain with, a somewhat higher position than our rank power rating in the world might suggest. We do have, amongst some, a sense that we have a historic legacy there, amongst others that we were guilty of a historic betrayal. But one way or another, it does give the British voice, some carrying power in the region, which is not to overestimate it that we have anything like the decisive peacemaking voice that the United States has. Now, I think both sides are struggling here. I mean, Jonathan Powell, the architect of the Northern Ireland Agreement, I am sure was a genuine source of quiet advice to Witkoff and his team, and a necessary one because they were very inexperienced. And, as I say, British diplomats are steeped in the region, so there will have been advice on the side, but it is not a determinant role.
No, that's a very, very fair way of putting it, Mark. I think great to speak to you. So interesting. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
That's Mark Malloch Brown there, who is the former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations.
We've got a number of updates for you. The Prime Minister has posted on X to say today is the first crucial phase in ending the war in the Middle East. Now we must deliver lasting peace and a secure future for the whole region. The UK is providing additional humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza, and we will lead efforts to accelerate its reconstruction. There's also been a statement from Hamas in the last few moments. It states the agreement reached is the fruit of steadfastness of our people and the resilience of their resistance fighters. It also goes on to say that Israel has, quote, failed to recover its prisoners through military pressure despite its superior intelligence and the surplus power it possesses. Now it's surrendered and recovered its prisoners through an exchange deal as the resistance promised from the beginning. That's a Hamas statement there, clearly seeking to redefine what is currently happening. The language used there and the sort of tone, if you like, is very clear to see. And we know that the Red Cross is travelling to receive more hostages in Gaza. 7 have been released so far today. They are now back in Israeli territory. There is a suggestion that the next wave of those hostages could be released and transferred very shortly. We'll bring you updates on that when we get them.